Thank you for joining us this evening. Regular scheduled council meeting of the Park City City Council on March 23rd, 2021 at 7 p.m. Marlo, would you call the roll?
John Lynn here.
Here.
George Glover.
Here.
Ben Saucetta. Melvin Kerr. Tom Jones.
Here.
George Capps.
Here.
Brandy Bailey. Here. Jim Schrader.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Sorry, we'll go back to George is going to lead in the invocation, and Councilmember George Capps is going to lead in the pledge. If everybody please stand.
Let's pray. Father God in heaven, we ask for unity tonight in making decisions that affect the citizens of Park City. We pray for wisdom, guidance, and discernment. We pray for provision to any residents in need. Please continue to guide us, O Lord, with all truth and righteousness. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Now, the first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. George?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Jim?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. We don't have anything for awards or presentations this evening. We have a couple of people signed up to speak at public forum. It's an opportunity to come and stand before the council and address for up to 5 minutes. And tonight, Harold, you're first.
I'm not much of a speaker, so apologize for being nervous.
Say your full name and your address.
Harold Bowser, 4681 North Briargate Court.
Go ahead.
We have some flooding issues. There's 10 homes down there that are being flooded on a regular basis every time it rains. Like last night, it got flooded. There's also a residential complex that probably has 100 residences or residential apartments in it that also gets flooded at the same time. I'd like to get the city to first acknowledge the flooding and that it's a problem. I've talked to the city many times about it. Our HOA president has spoken with them many times, and she's beaten her head up against the wall, and now she's frustrated with it. There's a simple fix. I wouldn't ask you guys to build a bridge to nowhere. I wouldn't ask you guys to move the White House, but all it takes to fix it is to dig a 50-yard ditch. If you guys don't want to do that, if the city doesn't want to do that, then just sign a letter saying not to arrest Harold Bowser until he gets the ditch dug, and I'll do it myself. It'd take me $300 to rent a machinery to dig the ditch, and it would relieve the problem. Is there a possibility of me getting a letter like that?
Well, we can talk about that and have a discussion, get more specifics of where the location is.
Mr. Fox knows about him. Maybe he can relate. Maybe he can shed some light on the issue.
Okay.
Can we put it on the agenda for next meeting?
I'll meet with you. I think I'm already talking to somebody else about this.
Cindy, she's the HOA president.
Okay.
And she's frustrated
Okay.
with the city. We've a year ago we were told that it'd be fixed in a couple of months. That was a year ago. It's still not fixed. And last thing I heard was it's too big of an issue for the city to deal with.
Okay.
I'll be glad to talk with you, but all I'm asking for is a letter.
Okay. Well, I'll give you a call and we can talk.
I'll leave you my telephone number.
All right.
All right. When will I get a phone call? By the end of the week?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. I'll have Cindy on the call with you.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Next, Theron. Theron.
I have 5 minutes?
Yep.
Oh, longer, but so I'll probably just go through this. Let me give you a copy, okay?
Go ahead and say your name and your address.
Darren Carmichael, My address is 5832 Fairview Avenue, 67204.
Give those out. There.
This problem started with this stop sign. That used to be my grass out there, and this high loader came out there and dug this grass up and put it at the end of my driveway in a water puddle, and it turned into mud. So, I've been dealing with this pond for years and years and years. Ever since they built the house across the duplex across the street. You'll see here a picture of the duplex. I talked to the administrator. I said, I think this was done under the table. I don't think this was done legally because this house extends out into the street and it's built on the setback. Now, if you'll notice above the house, it says 25 DR and utility easement. That's where the water is supposed to go. You'll also notice to the left of the house, it says 30-foot utility and drainage easement. That is also where the water is supposed to go. It is not supposed to go in my front lawn. This is not necessarily accurate. It's pretty accurate. But I have a Bosch measuring stick. I can go get this exact measurements, but I have to go in the person's lawn, pretty much. I think I can, with my device, I can measure from across the street, and I can get all the measurements on this correct. This right here is the pond in my front lawn. At the end of my driveway, in the street, is where it's at. At the end of my driveway, in the street, here's where I got the drainage information. As you can see, there's drainage that's supposed to go out here, 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 and then it's supposed to go out here to here. And that originally went back to the railroad tracks. Now it goes into a holding pond. I believe this photo is about 10 years old. So you know I didn't make this pond last week. It's been here ever since they built this house across the street that you can see. It's built in the street on the setback. I'm nervous. I'm sorry. This sheet looks like it's upside down. Now, if you'll notice, there's two corners. There's a corner on this side and there's a corner on this side. This one's a fair radius. This one is cutting off my yard. And that was my original complaint years ago. And that's why the stop sign is there. Jack put the stop sign there to keep the road grader from cutting my grass like it was cut a week ago. That's why the stop sign was there. Sean says, this is not a pond. He says it's a puddle. Or he didn't say what he thought it was. Pothole, puddle, I don't know. This is a frog, one of many frogs that live in the pond, what I call a pond at the end of my driveway. I've been recording them on videos and uploading them to YouTube for quite a long time, more than 2 years. This is just a close-up of the pond so you can see how far it goes out into the street. This is the 25,000 pound, I'm not sure what it is, 25,000 pound high loader, and what he's dumping is not dirt in the water puddle this time. It's a mixture of concrete and something in the water puddle, so it becomes liquid concrete without putting up any barriers, without putting up any caution tape, without knocking on my door and telling me I'm pouring concrete behind your driveway, without telling me do not drive through this. without any indication, no emails. Sean had my emails. He could have emailed me and said, we're going to put concrete at the end of your driveway. Don't drive in it till we tell you can drive in it. I drove in it right away because nobody told me. I thought they were done. They never came back. The concrete's on my truck.
Okay. We hit the 5-minute mark.
So, okay, I'm ready to go. Last thing, you don't have any statement of claims in that office. So, can't claim any. Actually, somebody told me to go use a Wichita statement of claim to claim the damage on the truck. I don't know what it is, $50, $70. I'm going to have an estimate on what it takes to clean it. So, I'll get a statement of claim, but you might want to get some statement of claim forms in there in case somebody in Park City in a fully does damage to somebody's property, then they can file to get compensation for that.
Okay. Thanks.
Any questions? Okay.
Thank you. That was the last thing we had for public forum. We don't have anything for staff reports this evening, and we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Ben
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
and Jim? I'd second that. We've got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. That brings us to new business, item 6, which is discuss and consider an appointment to the Convention and Tourism Board. We've been looking, or I've been wanting to make sure we could get somebody else with some hotel representation on the board because you're a little light on that end. So we've been able to get somebody from the sleep end that's willing to join, and I'd like to get him on the board. Tom?
I was going to say, I'd make a motion to remove if we appoint Glenn Lang to the Convention and Tourism Board.
George?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item 7, which is the downtown vision update. Terry?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mask off okay up
You're
here?
fine.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. It's good to be back in front of you. Terry Burke-Bigler with Confluence, planning consultant out of Kansas City. Been working with the community on developing this vision for the new downtown district, just out adjacent to the administration center here. Tonight, we're here to give you a preview of the plan refinements since the last time we talked. We've been taking community input. We had a public meeting a while back. I want to run you through that real quickly and then go through some of the updates we've been making to the plan, show you some illustrations of how that's developing and how we're incorporating the input that we received, and then talk a little bit about what the next steps are. Ultimately, we want to get any questions you have tonight. I'll be happy to answer those, or you can pass those on to Sean after tonight, and he can get those to us as we continue to refine the summary document. So just to make sure everybody recalls where we are, you can see City Administration Center there on 61st, and it's essentially the property to the south and east that wraps around behind the library, behind the City Administration, and over toward Hydraulic up to the senior center and the senior housing over there. This was a concept plan that we last reviewed with you, and Matt, there are a couple of follow-up slides on this you can go ahead and click through. So this showed mixed-use area up in the northeast corner, some single-family attached housing down in the southeast and along that southern border to kind of transition and set up against the housing that's there already to the south. The introduction of a new senior housing facility over on the west, adjacent to the existing senior facilities. potentially the introduction of a farmer's market and shared parking facility just to the east of that. Even the concept for the introduction of a community center in Park City, something that obviously is significant investment, but would take some additional study to determine the feasibility and the interest of that for the community, and that would be nestled in against the library to create kind of a strong civic campus, if you will, adjacent to this facility. And then finally, significant outdoor green space, that central civic space, and then more active play down kind of in the south central portion of the property there with maybe spray ground, playground, dog park, and some sport courts. So I want to go through quickly some of the information that we heard from the community. Oh my, I can't even read those from here, so I hope you guys can. But essentially the key is we had over 250 respondents. We met with the chamber, presented things to them, got some initial feedback and input from members at that, and they actually invited folks from the senior community to that chamber meeting. So we had a fairly good sized crowd there. The public meeting we had, I believe we had around 35 people approximately participate that evening, and then we had this online and had significant interest there. You can see the majority of those people are residents of Park City, but then there were some that they may work in Park City or perhaps just own property in Park City but don't necessarily live here. Some of the key words we heard, we asked people to sort of tell us what resonates with them for this new district, community, entertainment. The larger they are, the more they were shown or told to us. Something fun, something for families, walkable, inviting. You know, I don't think any of these things would be surprising that this is what the community feels like would be some much needed space and amenities and activities in the community. We asked them to give us a sense of, from an architectural design character, without being too specific, just on a sliding scale of 1 to 10, on the left side there, 1 being something more traditional, up to the right side being something more contemporary. And you can see there folks landed sort of in the middle to the left, so something more traditional, but there's some interest in maybe being a little bit contemporary. So that just gives us a sense of architectural character that the community might want to see. We also talked about density, and by that really at this point it's about maybe building height, building scale. So again, we're creating a vision. We're not really designing the finished product right now, but for you to inform developers in the future of what your vision is, this helps us try to build that image, to taking some of these words and some of these thoughts and making those into a more physical, visible form. So you can see there that really folks are leaning to something not too dense, 2 to 3 story, but we also look at that and say there is interest in potentially something a little taller, 3 to 4 story, as well as a significant number of folks that responded on something on the lower end. But if you count up all those responses there, you've got about 90. So not quite half of those folks really leaning, or half of that score leaning more toward that 2 to 3 story as a good sort of max density size. We asked them questions about what they'd like to see in the streetscape and the civic spaces, programming, things like that, and just rank what would your top 4 be. So it really forced people in that entire list of elements on the left, it forced them to prioritize and pick in their mind what would be their top 4 things they would like to see in the streetscape. So you can see we've just kind of identified the top 4 vote getters. It doesn't mean the others aren't important. It just means those are the ones that rank the highest out of all the participants in their 4 votes. Green infrastructure, some street planting, streetscaping, lighting, obviously, and then seating. So, but you kind of work your way down that and you can see there's opportunities for art, public art, and things like that as well. Civic space, interest in maybe water features. Those could be more sculptural, more playful, maybe an outdoor amphitheater space, park space, just more green, open flex space. So those are sort of the things people ranked on the higher end of things. But as we go through these concepts, you'll begin to see that a number of these elements still make their way into the project. Preferred programs, so what types of activities. So you can kind of see the top end there. The farmers market ranked really high. Opportunity for food truck activities, water play, again, kind of thinking about that water feature concept on the last one. Food, drink, festivals, things like that. So community gathering opportunities, events, just a lot of opportunity for family and gathering. Dog park ranked up there, having a movie night even, having concerts. So as we take that and translate that into the design, it's how can we achieve as many of these opportunities as possible, and a lot of that will lead to flexibility of design. And then, we asked people to sort of say, out of all of that, what do you think is the most important thing that the city needs right now? Because that really then makes them think, what is the most important thing in my mind? Clearly, right there, dining and restaurants, something more than what's available today. Entertainment. We heard a lot of discussion throughout this process about something for people to do at night, whether they're residents who live here that currently go to Wichita or other places for nighttime entertainment, or people that are coming in on the weekend for race weekend or other events, that they can find something fun to do in Park City, stay, enjoy, spend their dollars here. What other amenities and activities would you like to see specifically in this downtown district now? Before it was really talking, what does the community sort of overall need? Now specifically down here, opportunity for concerts, water features, a lot of those things you've already seen. Trails was a big one. So, quality of life is really a big ticket item here. Outdoor activities, opportunities for food trucks, family activities. So again, it's really telling us this is a place where the community and the people that responded to this said, this is where we want to have a place for gatherings for our families. We want our kids to grow up and want to stay or come back and raise their families. And that takes, quality housing, quality places, and events and things to do. Okay? I'm not going to try to read that, even with my good eye. But there were a few things on here. You don't want to lose sight of those important things, which are really over in that other column. Because it is important, fix the streets. Do the things you need to be doing first. And you'll hear that in any community. Before we begin to dream too much of the dream, or we begin to think too big, let's make sure we're taking care of the important things first. Doesn't mean you can't do both, but it's good to not lose sight of that. So right now, this is a project and an opportunity to really dream and think about the bold long-term vision for this space. But not losing the identity of who Park City is. This should be something that people come to and they know they're in Park City. What does that mean? We don't know yet. That will come further down the road. Services for seniors, that kind of goes back to walkability. What can they potentially live here and walk to? Beyond restaurants, what about pharmacies and shopping and groceries, day-to-day needs? So there's a lot of these other comments that actually make their way into this plan as well. Okay, so now I'm going to go through a whole series of views. So this is the plan, and you'll see, if you recall back in your mind what it looked like before. Essentially, the framework is still there. The roadway patterning, this single-family attached housing along the southern edge, the park space in the middle. The northeast corner potentially sees some of the most change as we've really started to define that more in building form and public space in response to what we heard, as well as the senior housing and market and community center. All the parts and pieces are still in their relative space. We've just started to define those further. And another thing that we do as we're designing spaces like this is begin to think of them with a personality. So whether it's a brand or a name or what have you, it just helps us communicate that. And it doesn't mean that that's what these things will always be called, but so for now, you're going to see us refer to the mixed-use area as the district, the central area as the district green, district park, and the district market. Doesn't mean that will stick or that has any importance other than our concept right now, but it helps us to have this conversation. So, and again, the specific components, up in the northeast corner, there's really that mixed-use commercial component. We think maybe along 61st Street, it makes more sense to primarily focus on residential. And as we've been looking at all along, that's probably where more of the density would go, is up along that major street. And then the single-family attached housing can provide that buffer to the south and to the southeast, where you've already got some duplex, single-family attached type housing. And we think that from a scale and density and neighborhood style, it makes a good transition. As you come off of 61st into that mixed-use area along what's called right now Stewart, that's where we see an opportunity to mix in more commercial. So maybe some ground floor commercial, and you'll see that in some of the illustrations. We're not talking about a lot of commercial. This wouldn't be a regional commercial center. I'm going to preface these quantities, these numbers with, this is not based on a market study or pro forma right now. Again, this is the big vision. This is the dream that then you can hope to have development partners aspire to with you. And ultimately, they would come forward with that data to confirm that the project works for them. And it's going to look different, but this at least gives you a sort of a reach goal, if you will, or a stretch goal. We're looking at, in that mixed-use area, you might have, say, 70,000 square feet of commercial. So that could house maybe a half dozen restaurants, maybe fewer. They could be larger, could be smaller, some coffee shop, cafe type spaces, more service-oriented type retail. Maybe you've got small, maybe there's a pharmacy in there, dry cleaners, things like that. The other thing is it's responding to what we're seeing in the market these days, and it's a lot of those services, the services you can't get online are still very viable in some of these leasable spaces. So it's barbershops, salons, cleaners, things like that. Wine shops, really good, kind of focusing more on local. There was a comment on that others that said, we don't need a Starbucks. What we take from that is maybe we should prioritize local, regional first, and then and that helps sort of reinforce that sense of Park City-centric identity. You can go back to that, Matt. And I just want to hit these numbers, and then I'll start to click through these a little quicker. So in terms of numbers, the mixed-use area, we don't have a mix in terms of unit types. Could be a mix of studio, single, one bedroom, two bedroom, three bedroom. You could get maybe up to 300, 350 units in there. Really kind of depends on what mix is appropriate, but there's some decent density that you could build up there. And even within that, it's feasible. That's the beauty of it, is it's not like you've got to deliver every building at the same time. In that, and I keep referring to it as that single family attached. On there it still says multifamily, but the housing along the bottom, row house, townhouse, condo type attached, those could be split apart. Someone might come in and say, we can do some of that, but we still need maybe a few single family detached units. Right now we're showing 126. That's just a ballpark. It could be a few less or a few more. Senior housing, that building over to the west could be, that could hold 60 or 70 on a 3-story type product there. That could go up or down based on what what a developer thinks is an appropriate bed count for them and for their product. We're seeing some of those become more active senior and a little bit more of a club or boutique, as opposed to what people have historically thought of in senior housing, assisted living, things like that. This could be something that's maybe more active aging. Community center, again, that's ultimately going to be reliant upon what the community thinks is appropriate. But that, just to give you a sense of scale, would show a high school-sized gymnasium, potentially some indoor aquatics, a lot of public meeting space, and maybe about a 50,000 square foot facility. That's not huge, but it's not small either for a community of this size. We think it's reasonable to look at as a goal. The park space, the smaller lawns, so you'll see this where the word amphitheater is up there, and you'll see it in some of the illustrations. So there's a small band shell there. That more intimate lawn space could hold an event of maybe 400 to 500 people. It really depends on how it's set up. And then the larger space, that larger civic green space, you could have a significant festival in there. If you had a large concert, 3,000 to 4,000 people. But you could also configure it in so many different ways with tents and things like that. It's really the key there is open space for people to play and configure however they want. But it gives you a sense of the scale. And then the farmer's market, what's shown there is something that could hold within the shed itself, and this would be sort of a dual purpose parking during the week or during non-market hours. And then it can house 30 to 40 vendors within the structure or underneath the shed, but then you can set up that whole parking lot with more tents depending upon what type of event you might want to have in there. Okay, so Matt, let's start clicking through. So here's a view. We're going to kind of fly around, look at some different views. So this is a view if you're sort of hovering up over just south of 61st Street, looking to the southeast. So you're looking over that civic space. There's a treed area there called the Grove that might be a nice shady spot within the park to sit, some picnic shelters, a playground, and then you can see that maybe more intimate amphitheater space there just on the right edge of that. And then you can see down there in the forefront how we're beginning to use some signage to create kind of that iconic sense of place within the area. As you come down in, maybe there's an opportunity for a little cafe in the park. Could be something that's privately operated. Maybe it's a sandwich shop, coffee shop, whatever. But just something that activates that space. It could be a revenue generator for the city. Could be something you privatize. Looking at, again, that community center as a very, very generic sort of model right now. Just thinking there's a placeholder in the plan for that. And at that time, it could be connected to or disconnected, but somehow adjacent to the library to sort of build that strong civic core. And maybe at that time, there's a renovation that makes the library fit the architecture of this building and that building. So thinking ahead to some of those things. And then in the background, you can see how that mixed-use commercial starts to look. And then as we swing around on Stewart and we're looking north into that mixed-use commercial district, you can see we're really trying to create a place, trying to create that plaza. So when the community said someplace to gather, someplace for families to get together, well, you've got the park, but you've also got a space that's maybe a little bit more active, potentially. So I can go inside, I can buy some ice cream, I can come out here, the kids can splash around in some water, we can hang out in the shade. But the other thing we were talking about is, because of how this is set up, so the first floor of those buildings, what we're envisioning is that would be your commercial space on these buildings in the foreground. So wrapped around with some smaller scale, really nice restaurants, shops, things like that. This could be configured in a way that you could actually purchase drinks in the restaurants and actually have this space where you can have the ability to carry drinks out into this. So it really becomes sort of a very dynamic and diverse event type space. Or there's even potentially the opportunity to have food trucks that pull up into this. There's just a lot of different ways to use this space. And then kind of flying over the more residential, so you can see you've got, what are the amenities for those apartments and what does that look like as they're facing 61st. The architecture is relatively generic right now. We're focusing more on mass and scale, but you can kind of get a sense for what that feels like. And then how it is complemented across the street by that single family attached and something that might be a little more urban. Maybe it's more urban along the main road there, and maybe as you get farther south into it, it might break down into smaller buildings. And then on the southeast corner, looking over the retention pond and creating that as an amenity for the entire property. And those trails then along the perimeter really give the entire community the opportunity to use this space. So it's not just for residents of this district. So it is an amenity for the entire community and connects up with the park and trails just to the north as well. Pardon me. And then spinning around, you're looking at the south. You can see the sport courts there, a number of pickleball courts, which is the hottest thing right now in sports. I'm seeing some nodding and some eyebrows. Yes. I have yet to see an empty pickleball court this year. It's like second to golf and things people can do outside during COVID. And then other sport courts. But you see that active play, and then you can see the opportunity for some single family. And again, I don't want to overstate this, or I don't think I can overstate it, that this is a model. There are different ways that developers may want to approach that single family. But what we heard was maybe something more dense in this area. And then you can see how this all really focuses on that central green space. And then within that active play area, you've got opportunity for dog park. You know, maybe there's some bocce courts or some other type of activity. Some picnic shelter, park shelter, shaded areas. Maybe there's a playground. It could be dry, wet, splash playground combo. We've done some of those as well. But really, that is sort of the neighborhood park almost. It's open to anyone in the community, but it really provides a great amenity for the residents of this neighborhood. Right out their front door. And then you kind of spinning around there, just looking back at the sport courts there, and then kind of giving you a scale of the whole property. This is not a small property. 48 acres may not seem like much when you're driving around it and you see it, but when you start adding buildings and people and scale, that's why we do these studies, because it really gives you a sense of this is a really significant undertaking. You know, you all probably know that, but I think this helps to reinforce to everyone that this is not an overnight vision. And to get it the way you want it, you're taking the right steps of thinking about it all together rather than just sort of putting it out there and seeing what comes. Coming down into that the district park, you can kind of see how that feels and opportunities for public art throughout. And just trying to activate those green spaces as much as possible. The green spaces are as much about providing something for the community as they are in helping to incentivize developers, because it's an amenity that they can sell to if they're an apartment owner or apartment builder who's going to hold that property, that's a great amenity for them to be able to sell. If it's someone who's trying to sell lots and they've got that park, that helps them sell lots if they're not going to hold those properties. It's a great thing to help attract businesses that might want to lease, whether it's office or retail space, because they see, as well as businesses that aren't even within this district, are looking for where they want to land and provide amenities for their employees. So more and more, Parks and Recreation and Quality of Life is a serious tool in your economic development quiver, and things like this will really pay off beyond just this 48 acres for you. And, you know, more in that space. This is more in the central lawn. We're getting my bearings here, so we're looking back. We'd be looking to the east here, maybe hovering, Yeah, we're looking to the west. It's the senior housing there in the distance. And you can kind of see community center just kind of peeking over that kind of north, the right-hand edge. But, you know, maybe there's some sculpture garden opportunities. These are opportunities where you can partner with other organizations, whether it's WashU or some other programs, or sponsoring with private organizations that might want to help create these types of amenities. And then that market, you can see how this is just a very quick concept of what that could look like, but the concept is similar to a lot of those. Open air shed. If you wanted to take that a bit further, you could enclose it, make it, you know, garage doors that open. It can become a year-round rentable space. But you can see how that can then activate that into that park. It could be done on a time when there's nothing else going on in the park, and it just is another reason for people to come. And then looking at the residential neighborhood there at the southwest corner, and you can kind of see how, you know, a senior housing building can fit in. It doesn't look out of place, but it really, I think, provides a good multi-generational housing option. So you've got young families, maybe singles, service industry in some of these apartments, all the way up to your active aging and your seniors. So you've got an opportunity to hit all generations and you know, demographic. And then another view just kind of spinning around the site and pulling back a little bit. So before we wrap up, what's next? So we're finalizing this plan and these illustrations. We'll be adding a little bit more, not a lot more detail, but a little bit more kind of finessing the images, I guess you can say. But the real piece that we're working on next is that design intent narrative. So we're not going so far as to say design guideline or design standard, because we don't want to hem it in too much. But what we do want to do is give potential developers sort of a playbook that the city is going to go by. And within that, we'll be discussing site development and configuration. So taking these things we've heard about density and what goes where on the site and putting that into something that helps a developer and their design team understand, okay, and contractor team, if this is what they're looking for, that gives us an indication of order of magnitude, sort of price point, whether it's construction or, and ultimately backing in there, what is the pro forma, what is the potential lease rate that's going to fit what the city is wanting to see here for apartments and things like that, the building massing. Preferred materials. So, we're not going to say it shall be this many square feet of glass versus brick or anything, but at least provide a general guide of what are the materials that the community prefers to see here. That's when you begin to sort of set a standard for quality, but also help to define the image and protect that identity that people have talked about. If we want something that is distinguishable and doesn't just look like every other project out there. Right now, it looks fairly generic, and that's intentional because we're not designing the final thing yet. And then these green spaces, giving a little bit more narrative definition of what those can be, and then the urban design character, what happens in the streets and the streetscapes and things like that. That really helped us to tell the story and define that character. All right, Matt? So this is just a quick fly through the site, and then we'll wrap it up and answer questions. And Sean, I don't think I kept 15 minutes like I said I would. You didn't think I could. So this gives you a sense of sort of how it all fits together. Just kind of flying around the mixed use area there on the left, park on the right. You can see some of the opportunities for sculpture in these green spaces. And then how that plaza space. We're trying to create more public plaza here at the foreground, but then let it be more private as it moves up into the north where it's more residential. Kind of hovering up over the park there and the active play area. And then we'll move back around to the south side of the Civic Green. And then kind of that amphitheater space and the market and senior housing. And I'd say, throughout, this is there's a very flexible plan here. Things aren't packed in too tightly. I think they have room to breathe, which does a couple of things. It allows you to provide green space. It's not over dense, but it also allows flexibility for the final product to respond to market. And to what a developer says, hey, I can do this. It may not be exactly what you had on there, but is this, yes, this keeps it close to our vision. We can feel good about moving this forward. So it gives you some room, and it gives them some room to really design the final product a little bit better than if we had things sort of shoehorned in there too tightly. All right, Matt, and then this is the end. This is what we think could be a pretty exciting place to be. Anxious to answer any questions you have and, work with the team to continue to refine this.
Does anybody have any questions? It's more mind-blowing than George.
Well, I have one, and I don't see anything on here that would concern me that way. But the one thing that drives me crazy is these tall signs, these tall flashing commercial signs. And like we've got one over here in this old shopping center with the flashing lights that drive people nuts at night.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hope that I've been up to Overland Park a couple of times, and it's really impressive the fact that they don't have any tall signs. Really makes that town look nice.
Well, so those are the types of things that we can put in here. And we can make that, and even at this early stage, to minimize, and there's a reason we're not big fans of that either, and I don't think this is the appropriate place for those. Those tend to be more highway oriented typically, and so I think your point is it's a good one. That's the type of input we want to hear to make sure that we're maybe putting in protection for those types of things.
Well, I know they can do it because Ray and I went over to McDonald's and ate breakfast there at Overland Park, and their Golden Arch, it wasn't big like it is most places, they were apparently willing to work with Overland Park on that.
And there are different tools, depending upon where the city wants to ultimately go in terms of regulating this property or others within the community. There are different tools that can be used. And, we're not there right now, but design guidelines or the way this comes forward, if it's some sort of planned development district, and you can, work with the developer to write in those requirements. So there's a lot of ways that you can protect yourself from those, but that's why we have those discussions now. So we're starting to set the stage without having too many teeth, but we're at least saying, hey, this is where we're headed. So when you get some developers interested in talking to them, they're not caught too off guard by that.
It looks good.
All right. Ben?
Back when we had, I think it might have been December timeframe, November timeframe, our first meeting there, you all had a time, let me rephrase that as a question. Did you all have a time there where you met with developers and such in the area just to kind of get a feasibility of what the market's looking like?
So we had a meeting, an open meeting with developers, folks from the development, contracting community, design community in the kind of Wichita metro. Had a pretty good turnout. I would say there was good discussion that gave us a sense that we weren't too far out in left field. I think that's what we were hoping to come away with was, hey, if we're doing something here that just isn't going to work, tell us. We want to, without showing their cards, just give us an idea. Do you think we're out in left field? And we came away with that, and I think Sean would reiterate that we got what we needed, which was, okay, this has some merit, and we felt like we could continue down this road, and we weren't too far off of a real marketable product.
It looks really great, and I will say I am much more of a fan of private development, and rather than getting too far in the weeds on public side of it, they're just giving the markets a chance to run it rather than us, but I appreciate what you all put in here on this.
Thank you.
Anybody? Jim? And then
I don't really have any questions other than just to say I really like how you put it together, and I think it's I like this concept. This is pretty slick. It's neat to see it on paper and starting to take some kind of form. I mean, there's $100 million plus probably in real estate development here, depending on what these buildings look like, and that's that'd be an awful big investment in our city, and definitely like the idea. Keep it open to the private industries and let the laws of supply and demand see what it'll bring. But I like it. I like the amphitheater. I like a lot of things about this.
Well, I appreciate that. And our philosophy on projects at this early stage is really what we're saying. It's you define the vision, but don't over define it to where it either pushes you out of the market or it scares people away that you're going to be too restrictive. But make a clear statement that you're willing to partner. And I think that's been what we've heard all along is this is a partnership opportunity. This isn't something the city can or would do all themselves. And the other thing, on the magnitude or the scale, this is, driving around here today again, just kind of reminded me, this is where a developer and, when they start looking at feasibility, they'll start looking at maps and what supports this. And you look beyond Park City to fill these apartments and these houses. Yes, this is going to be an opportunity for current residents to maybe move to a different location, maybe upgrade or stay as they get older. But what's the market outside of Park City today? And it's not too far away from things like Coke industry. You've got some well-paid young professionals that are within reach of a place like this. And you start looking at what other options do they have like this, potentially, that are as close to work. And so that's part of what we look at as well, is everybody wants to know what their commute time is. And if you can provide an attractive option that's shorter than others, then that's a benefit. And so that's, when you start looking beyond the Park City proper, you'll start to see there really is, some more room in the market for something like this that, You know, there are people that earn a decent wage working in industry. You've got a lot of industry. And I think the other thing is providing a mix. So you're going to have a lot of new jobs potentially coming in. So that'll be part of what you're going to want to work through in defining what you want from a developer in terms of housing. Something that's affordable to a broad range. Doesn't mean it has to be an income qualified product, but do you have something that can be approachable by a wide range of your current as well as some of those future employees that are going to be coming in to work some of these new jobs. So those are the things that kind of that next step down the road that you're going to have to start thinking about.
Real quick before you jump in here, George, the one thing I think of when I look at the green space is like the Cedric County Park and how huge of a section that is and what that tracks as far as people willing to live around that. And I see a duplication here of that, of having so much green space that it would attract people to here because of exactly what you said earlier, because a developer can sell that as well as the property. And,
Right.
you know, it makes it more desirable. And I think it also makes more desirable for the rest of the community, the way we have the tie-in with the walking paths hooked up to our existing parks. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
George?
Yeah, I was just encouraged by the number of residents who showed up to give vision and insight on what they want to see in Park City. That's one of the things we've had issues with is, let's see what your vision is for this city. So let's invite folks in, and I appreciate the way that, you know, it was done. As far as proximity to Wichita, it takes me 20 minutes to get to my job in central Wichita from here. So the proximity to come out here and enjoy these spaces I think we're going to be great as far as what we provide the citizens, not only of Park City, but also other citizens as well, the proximity around us. But with Amazon and Coke and some, like you said, some of those higher paying positions, those folks are going to need places to live. And I think we're on the right track in providing that. So I appreciate your insight on this.
Absolutely.
The other thing that's exciting is just the different levels of housing. I mean, I've talked about it multiple times that we need something for somebody for every stage of life where they can continue to stay here, because some people, they really enjoy it here. And, you know, to make sure we have some senior housing that somebody can get into, the young professional at Coke that may not want to worry about yard maintenance or anything like that, having something that has a downtown feel to it, that's just minutes away from work.
Yep. Now, we heard that from the very beginning, is range of housing product, and to serve a range of demographic in the community. And, you know, that started with the city having the vision to even acquire this property back when it did, and say that you're going to do more than just wait and see what the market will bring to you for housing, and these other amenities and services, but actually being a little more proactive. And doesn't mean you're going to build it, but it means you've got a stake in, you know, a greater stake in what that can be now. And so, you know, it'll take time. It's not an overnight, as I said. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day. This won't be built in a day. But I think if you find some good partners, and I think we had some good partners in the room that day that are, you know, would be interested in continuing the conversation.
Anybody else?
Mayor, if I could, as far as timing, the one thing that we do need to do, and we've talked about this earlier, is somewhere within the next 2 to 3 weeks, they'll put the final touches on the actual written portion of it, the report. But then we want to run that through planning and zoning first. So that will be the month of April. So the next time, I know everyone wants to get going on this, how quick, but it'll probably be about the first or second meeting in May that we will be bringing it back, having been through planning and zoning first with their recommendation, hopefully for the council to adopt it or incorporate this into the comprehensive plan as a new appendix or chapter. So,
I don't think anybody wants to rush this, but I mean, we definitely want to make sure we nail some of those design standards, because
yes, sir.
that was the whole point of capturing that project or this property is so that we can control some of that and make sure we end up with a great final product.
Well, and as we talked, that next meeting, then, that'll be one where we want to get you guys that document ahead of time so you have a chance to read it, think about it, and then when we talk about it here, we can, find out what else we want to hit in there that isn't covered. So it'll be a good input session.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you and your team. You've done a phenomenal job.
Well, we appreciate the opportunity. It's been a fun and continues to be a fun project. So these are the exciting ones to help see these things come about. So we're looking forward to seeing this thing all the way through.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank
So
you.
thanks. Have a good day.
Appreciate it. That brings us to item 8, which is discuss and consider a resolution for the sale and conveyance of certain property to the Country Park residents. Doug?
Mayor and Council, this is an IRB matter, and it's a wrapping up of the city's involvement. And actually, I will ask you to do a little more work than what appears on the face of item 8. We have 2 resolutions because there were 2 separate industrial revenue bond issues related to the Country Park residences. The first one was in 2003. There was a 10-year property tax abatement, and that expired in 2013. And that was issue number 1, Country Park Residences 1. Country Park Residences 2 was in 2010, and likewise had a 10-year property tax abatement, which expired last year. Because of that, the owners of the project are ready to redeem the bonds, and under the terms of both of those bond issues, when that happens, the city is then obligated to reconvey the property to the owners of the Country Park residences. So what I would ask you to do is do 2 motions tonight, and I'll give you the information on the first one, which is Country Park Residences 1. That would be Resolution 1062-2021.
Doug, that's 1064.
Pardon me?
1064.
6-4.
Country 1 is 1062. 1060, I'm sorry. Thank you. Let's start with Country Park Residences 1, which is a little different than what the motion says there. That would be Resolution 1066-2021. And then subsequent to that, a second motion to approve Resolution 1064-2021 for Country Park Residences 2. Sorry for the confusion.
Ben?
Yeah, so let's make sure we get this right here. So I'm going to make a motion to approve Resolution 1064-2021, a resolution of the governing body of the City of Park City, Kansas, authorizing the sale and conveyance of certain property Country Park Residence 2, LC.
Is there a second? Brandon?
Second the motion.
Is there any discussion? Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Marla, would you call the roll?
Jonathan Ahern.
Aye.
George Glover.
Aye.
Ben Sosetta.
Aye.
Melvin Kerr. Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Capps.
Aye.
Brandy Bailey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Aye. And that resolution passes 7-0. Ben?
Okay, so now I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve Resolution 1066-2021, a resolution of the governing body of the City of Park City, Kansas, authorizing the sale and conveyance of certain property to Country Park Residents, LC. 1, LC.
Okay. Brandy?
Second the motion.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. Marla, would you call the roll?
John Lanier.
Aye.
George Glover.
Aye.
Ben Sosetta.
Aye.
Melvin Kerr. Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Capps.
Aye.
Brandy Bailey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Aye. And that resolution passes 7-0. Thank you, Doug. That brings us to item 9, which is discuss and consider the property casualty and workers' compensation insurance renewal. Marla?
Mayor and council, the city's insurance policies will expire on April 1st, 2021. The quote for the upcoming year for Employers Mutual Casualty Company, EMC, is $184,281. This is a 5.9% increase from the 2020 quote. The increase is due to added equipment to the city's inventory, upgrading city vehicles, and a slight increase in the experience modification factor. The city does receive an annual dividend from EMC each year. The typical average dividend paid out to the city for the last 3 years has been $29,974. Staff recommends approving EMC's proposal for $184,281. Anybody have any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Ron? Jim?
I don't have any questions, so I would move to approve the proposal from, I think there's a typo here. Anyway, from Employers Mutual Casualty Company, EMC, for $184,281, effective April 1, 2021.
And John?
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item 10, which is discuss and consider an agreement with the Wyandotte Nation related to the city providing law enforcement assistance and enforcement on the trust and land at Crosswinds Casino is located on. Doug?
Mayor and council, as you all know, the casino has been open for a short period of time. And the phrase used in the introduction to that item is that the casino is located on trust land. That land is held in trust by the federal government for the Wyandotte Nation, and it is like a separate little country. It is outside of the jurisdiction of federal, state, and local laws. It's a sovereign little 10 acres of land operated by the Wyandotte Nation. The nation wishes the city to provide law enforcement services to the casino and to the 10 acres of land that's in trust. And in order to do so, it gives a limited waiver of its sovereign immunity and invites the city to do that. And that's what the agreement generally does. It sets out a few specifics about the cooperation between the city and the nation. And it's a necessary instrument in order for our police force to go on to the land and the casino and to enforce our ordinances. So I would recommend approval and be glad to answer any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Doug?
I do.
John?
So I'm just curious, like, by entering into this agreement with us, and then we have, the city has an agreement with, like, the county or Keachai or those towns, would they still be able to come and assist our guys at these calls?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that, you mean if we ask for assistance?
Right.
I'm sure as a practical matter that would absolutely work. We would be the enforcing agency. We would be the ones responsible for arrests and for processing people, and we would do the prosecution either in our municipal court or take the matter down to the district attorney. As you're aware, the doors are open on the land. Anybody can come on there and go into the casino. So the presence of other law enforcement officers under circumstances that I'm kind of imagining this would arise under, I'm sure would be no problem. That's not addressed specifically in the agreement, but I don't see a difficulty with that.
Thank you.
Okay. Tom?
Well, I was going to say, and adding to what John's calling or talking about there, I think that 911 dispatches whoever's available. If Park City is busy, then they would dispatch somebody else. So they would show up there at that event.
This doesn't cover that, so
And we have a mutual agreement, so they probably would be able to do that. I don't know.
And that's what I was meaning. Would an assisting agent fall under, since it's a mutual agreement with Park City, I assume they would be under our umbrella of this agreement?
That would be my assumption.
Okay.
On mine, they are still planning on having their own security on the facility.
They have contracted security. The
Right.
nation has a police force of
Right.
trained police officers, but they are not going to be operating at Crosswinds. They have a director of security who is an employee of the Wyandotte Nation, and then they have several contract security people who operate on the casino, in the casino and on the casino property, and deal with general operational, issues. Law enforcement, they do not have authority to arrest people or to process people for the commission of crimes, either under our ordinances or state law. So that's our job.
Okay, but my question is, are we going to provide, they will have in-house services for security, and we will be providing security when requested up there, or not security, but law enforcement when requested up there?
Correct.
We're short officers right now, and I don't want to have two of them spending all their time up there because we're the police force. You know what I'm saying?
I don't have any way to predict the demands up there.
I understand.
If there's a need for two people, I'm sure we'll send two people. But we don't provide security.
No,
We respond to calls to police calls, just like they respond in the community.
Okay, and I understand that, and security wasn't the right word. They have in-house security is what I'm saying, and we are doing the policing of that at their request for our ordinances and stuff that would be enforced there.
Yes, I think the way it practically, I think, would operate is if in the view of the security people at the casino, there's a violation of law, they would call us.
Okay. Yeah. My concern is that we get a lot of calls, and we don't know whether we will or not, so, okay. And then if we do, we diluted our force, so, okay.
George?
Yeah, my concern is with our current police force and who we have basically able to go out and patrol the areas. Any kind of undue pressure that it's going to put on our own police force in responding to calls out there. Is there going to be a need to hire more officers for us in order to respond as you get more people out there? And you're going to be responding to police calls out there because you're going to have more folks, you're going to have them involved in different things, maybe some things in the parking lot. Do we have adequate force to take care of that, or will we have to hire more police officers? And I'm talking about maybe not now, but down the road as this thing gets bigger and bigger, to have that force to take care of these calls.
It's kind of, we're getting off in the ditch just a little bit because it's really no different than a Walmart or an Amazon. They have security in-house, they have cameras, they monitor stuff, and when they need help, they call. And until you have some type of matrix to determine what that future looks like, we don't have a glass ball that we can look into to forecast. That's going to come out down the road.
And all I'll suggest is, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, but the next item addresses the finances of the need, should that arise in the future. So I guess I can answer your question sort of practically or common sense wise. Yeah, that'll probably put a demand that was not expected. But the mayor was making the comment that if a big business comes to town and operates in a way that puts a demand on our police force, the way we operate presently is that we receive ad valorem taxes from the value of the structures that business occupies in our city. The nation is exempt from ad valorem taxes, and that's the purpose of the next agreement that's coming up, is they have, with the city, agreed to pay a percentage of the gross revenue that the casino generates which in the estimation of Sean and me and others on staff is well in excess of even the value of that multi-million-dollar casino that's out there. So,
Okay, George?
Well, I think we're making much ado about nothing here, you know. The first part about other agencies, you know, Kansas law allows an officer to deputize people. They can give a verbal deputization. If the officer needs help and he asks it, then that officer is operating under his authority. And I think it's a mute issue, that part. And as far as responding up there, I don't see it any different than if we're having a wrestling tournament up at Hartman's and things get out of hand. You know, when we have deals like that, our officers are responding. You know, if it gets too much, we just have to grow. That's part of growth.
Tom?
Well, I was just bringing it up because it's something that we need to look at in the future. And I'm not saying I want to do this. I would like to support this, but we need to go up with our eyes open and realize that there's going to be some impact down the road. So.
Ben?
Just kind of going back here where we started on that originally is there seems to be already at least underlying tensions between some jurisdictions, municipalities concerning this whole thing and the casino in general, making sure that Cedric County Sheriff's Office would respond under our agreement with them, or what I think would be important to make sure that we're doing our due diligence. I don't think honestly, I don't think officers are going to not respond in the case of an officer in danger or anything like that. But if we have those on the other side that want to make a deal out of their agreement, or they're not receiving compensation or whatever the case might be, I think it'd be worth it to make sure that our memorandum of understanding with the Sheriff's Department or for coverage there covers into this as well.
John?
Yeah, I mean, what we said earlier, I feel like this right here is, we have to pass this. Because as of right now, there's a public safety issue if we were not to pass this going forward. Because our folks, whatever happens up there is going to be, technically it's on the sovereign land, but it's in Park City. So right now, this needs to be done. So, the other details we can work out later, but as Doug said, they're exempt. So we need this agreement so we can go and our people can do our jobs and protect the public that's going there and leaving there.
I was going to move that we approve the agreement to authorize the mayor and the city clerk to sign the same agreement.
George?
Well, I think I'm with John. I don't see it as being an issue. I think we're digging a hole we don't need to dig. Just my opinion.
Okay. Brandy?
I was just gonna make a motion.
Okay, we got a motion by Tom and a second by John. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. And that motion passes 6-1. That brings us to item 11, which is discuss and consider an agreement with the Wyandotte Nation related to the city providing municipal services on the trust land at Crosswinds Casino located on.
Mayor and Council, I should look at my packet in advance. I trust that I have everything, and in this case, I don't have either my staff summary or this agreement. So my question is, do you have yours?
Yeah.
Okay, good. This is fairly lengthy compared to the agreement that you just adopted as far as law enforcement goes, but it is significantly less lengthy than the agreement that we sort of jumped off of to start to develop the relationship between the city of Park City and the Wyandotte Nation. That was fashioned after the Kansas City Unified Government Agreement of about 13 years ago with the Wyandotte Nation for the 7th Street Casino in downtown Kansas City. That agreement was some 35 pages with exhibits. we've pared this down significantly. A lot of the language is what lawyers call boilerplate. It's repeated about 5 times because, again, the Wyandotte Nation is a sovereign, these 10 acres are sovereign lands, and the agreement for the city to provide services to them, we've talked about law enforcement, but there's water and sewer service, and for the city to do that, there has to be, again, these limited waivers by the nation of their sovereign immunity. The most significant, which I already referred to when we were talking about the prior item, the most significant item in this agreement is the compensation to the city for the provision of its municipal services, which is 1.5% of the gross revenue generated by the Crosswinds Casino. And again, the reason for this is that the land and the improvements on the land are exempt from the city's ad valorem tax. And so this is a way to compensate the city for this casino being in the middle of our city and being in need of municipal services. Again, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Brandy?
I just have a question for clarification. In the agreement, it talks about water and sewer services being needed out there as well, and then it talks about then the 1.5% for the compensation to the city for the services. So is the 1.5%, does it include water and sewer, or will water and sewer still be paid separately?
Still paid just like anybody else.
Okay, so we get water and sewer money, then we get
The 1.5%.
the 1.5% on another call.
Correct.
Okay.
Good question.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim?
I had some questions. I don't think it's my place to say what their expectations of adjusted gross income is, but I saw some of it, some of the estimates, and 1.5% of that is well in excess of what it would cost us to hire additional police staff and go out there and take care of this. So I found it to be a financially responsible, and you know, I support it. So.
Okay. Tom? You did? Brandy?
Just one more question. So 1.5%, I didn't see anything about a cap in here. There's no cap at what the revenue.
As it's drawn in front of you, that's correct.
Okay.
We have not received let me back up, and I should have made this comment on the prior item. We've received the approval of the Wyandotte Nation to the law enforcement agreement. As of this afternoon, I don't think we had received them saying, this is all good. So the action, I guess, would be for, if the motion is made to approve this, to approve it subject to the administrator, the city attorney, and the mayor making non-material changes. If you consider that material change to be a cap set on it, then we could bring it back for a revision.
I don't think we'd ever want a cap.
And that's the initial discussion with the tribe. The way that it was crafted by Doug was predicated on conversations with the chief of the tribe. His indication is he had outlined what the previous agreement with the 7th Street Casino was, and he said, let's just simplify it and do 1.5%, mention nothing about a cap at all. Kind of gave me the projected revenue of what we were looking at, and we kind of said, that is very fair. It's approximately 7 times what the value of the building would bring in ad valorem tax for the city, based on 44 mills or current mill rate. So we have gone ahead and proposed it up with the initial discussions that we've had. Now he is just having his attorney review it to come back before. So that's why we felt confident to get this going at this time.
Tom?
The only concern that I had reading through there was it's an adjusted gross income. So there's some caveats in there. It's not gross income.
Right. It's pretty much gross income.
It defined it.
It's defined as pretty much what they take in.
Okay.
Now, obviously, they have payouts.
Right.
So,
Payouts.
yeah, we don't get
some other stuff in there that I noticed. So it's a modified gross income.
Well, no, it's pretty much gross income, and it's audited. There's provisions for audit in there.
I've got it open right here. It just says less deductions of prize payouts, payments to federal and state gaming regulatory agencies, and free coin play.
Prizes and stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if they take in $100 and pay out 95, we get 1.5% of $5. But they do a lot of that.
Trying to make,
so.
yeah. Okay.
Ben?
Sure, I would go ahead and make a motion to approve the agreement, subject there to the, let me get this right there.
It's just subject to the city administrator, the city attorney, and the mayor approving non-material modifications to the agreement.
Perfect. Just what Doug said.
And authorize the
Oh, and,
mayor and the
oh,
city
sorry,
clerk
and
to-
authorize the mayor to execute, authorize the mayor and city clerk to sign the same. Sorry, thank you.
John?
Second.
Okay.
And
Did you?
if we're going to continue the discussion, something I said, I mean, at some point, we need to have a discussion on with money of this sort that comes in. I mean, a long time ago, we talked about developing a Park City Foundation. I think something like this is maybe something that we can discuss with that later. I know it's not now, but I just want to throw that out there while we're having this discussion. So I think this is a source that could possibly help our entire community. So, thank you.
Did you have another question? Okay. We got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. George, you were for that one? Okay. Item 12, discuss and consider approval of a three-party agreement with Cedric County, Valley Center, and Park City for the 77th Street project. Sean?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. In February, as you know, Council approved the agreement with KDOT and the cities of Valley Center and Park City for the reconstruction of East 77th Street, otherwise known to us as 77th Street, for all the way over to the bridge over to the Wichita Valley Center floodway to I-135 as part of their economic development program. As outlined earlier, the total estimated project cost are right at $6.3 million. KDOT is contributing 70% of the construction costs, which are estimated at just over $5 million, which equates to $3.533 million. The cities, therefore, are responsible for 30% of the construction costs, as well as 100% of the preliminary engineer, construction engineer, right-of-way, and utility relocation adjustments. Attached is the draft three-way agreement with Cedric County, whereas they have committed to paying 1/3 of the local match, not to exceed $936,643.35. With, out of that amount, the estimate for construction engineering was $507,441.99. They have that capability in-house, so they will be providing those services in kind, with the remaining $429,201.36 in reimbursement. The total estimated project cost to Park City, all told, all partners involved, is approximately $571,000 for the improvements. So staff recommends approval and authorizing the mayor to execute the agreement between Cedric County, Valley Center, and Park City.
Jim?
I find this consistent with what we've talked about before, like how we've spread the cost out, and I would go so far as to move to approve and authorize the mayor to execute an agreement between Cedric County, Valley Center, and the city.
And Brandy?
I second the motion.
Tom, did you have a question?
No, I was going to second it.
Okay. We got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item 13, discuss and consider an emergency water supply plan for the city. Sean? Sorry, Simon?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I've got a couple of items on the agenda tonight. The first one being the emergency water supply plan. According to KAR 28-15-18, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment mandates that each water supplier adopt a plan for responding to emergencies which impact the water supply. The overall purpose of the plan is to ensure the city is able to isolate and conserve an adequate supply of potable water during emergency conditions, available to sustain life and maintain standards of hygiene and sanitation. The document that I typed up is pretty lengthy, but it is pretty simple. So our recommendation would be to approve the Park City Emergency Water Supply Plan and adoption of resolution 1065-2021. You guys have any questions about that?
Anybody have any questions for Simon? This is something we usually do on an annual basis that we try to get back, and then it also goes to the CCUA, and then they file it with their records as well. Tom? Sorry. John?
I'd make a motion to approve resolution 1065-2021, adopting the emergency water supply plan for the Park City.
Okay. Tom?
I'll second that.
Okay. We got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. Marla, would you call the roll?
John Lanier.
Aye.
George Glover.
Aye.
Ben Saucetta.
Aye.
Melvin Kerr. Tom Jones.
Aye.
George Capps.
Aye.
Brandy Bailey.
Aye.
Jim Schrader.
Aye.
And that resolution passes 7-0. And that brings us to item 14, which is discuss and consider the municipal water conservation plan. Simon?
So Park City has undertaken numerous steps over the years to ensure a dependable water supply for its residents. The city utilizes water from the Cheney Reservoir in addition to wells prior to the treatment and distribution from the city of Wichita and the Chisholm Creek Utility Authority. We store treated water via 3 different elevated storage tanks, and our supply and distribution system has ample capacity to meet the current demands as well as future projected demands for several years, except for during drought periods. Attached is the municipal water conservation plan that represents an additional step in ensuring our customers have a dependable water supply in future years. The primary objectives of the water conservation plan are to develop long-term water conservation plans, a short-term water emergency plan to assure the city customers have an adequate water supply to meet their needs. The efficient use of water also has the beneficial effect of limiting and postponing water distribution system expansion, and thus limiting or postponing the resultant increases in cost, in addition to conserving the limited water resources of the state of Kansas. The staff recommends approval of the Park City Municipal Water Conservation Plans with a couple changes, such as on page 5. On page 5, the paragraph 2, it says the water rate structure for the city was passed on January 28th of 2020 via ordinance 1087-2020. And also on page 14, which is the last page. There's some fee structures associated with this, and the way that this is wrote out is exactly how the state of Kansas, the KDHE recommended their Conservation Act to be written. However, our reconnection fee at this time is $75 if you were to get your water shut off due to non-payment. So it doesn't really match up with what we already have as far as our reconnection fees go. So my proposal would be to change that to actually state that the first reconnect fee would be the same as the, how do we word that?
Rate plan.
The rate plan, yeah. At the fee to reconnect, when the offense was taken place, it matches what the current reconnection fee is, and then the subsequent violation shall be, and you guys could choose on what you want to do. 1.5 times or 2 times, and then the third would be however many times on top of that. So,
If I may, part of the reason why we had this discussion is, as we have noticed with some of our various different ordinances, if we have it here and then all of a sudden we do a rate change in the future, somebody's got to remember, hey, we've got it in here as well. So if we always reference the normal rate charge ordinance that should have all our different rates in it, that's the only one that we have to change. So that way this one is not referring to a specific dollar amount, it's referring to our other ordinance that we do change all the rates at the same time. So that way we can sit there and say whatever the going rate is at the time of the offense, there's your first one. And then it's up to the council to determine how much more of a penalty somebody would want to levy for a second violation. If you do 1.5, or like he mentioned, two times the normal rate, and it's however the council would like to determine that. So that's why we kind of left that blank for council's discussion.
Okay. Do you have anything else?
no, so we're just ready for some feedback on that. Do you guys have any questions?
John?
I do. What is the connect fee?
Right now, it's $75.
For a new customer?
No, this is a reconnection
Disconnect,
fee.
yeah.
If you don't pay your water bill,
No, what I ask is, what is the connect fee? A new customer hooking on, what do we charge them to connect?
really sure.
What is it for a new customer? And George, if I may, sir, that's kind of hard to answer, because when somebody comes up with a brand-new house, then we have a new water fee, the water meter we have to install. So we actually go to the Public Works Department. They indicate the pieces and parts, what all it's going to take. Are you asking if I were to move in, what's a brand-new connection fee?
Right.
If it's an existing house?
Right.
Do we know that, Dee? Sir, we don't know that off the top of our heads, but if
Well,
you,
how do you charge them then?
well, right now, we have a rate fee ordinance that has that written down. I just don't know that off the top of my head, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
I don't know it off the top of my head, but we can get that information for you.
Okay, well, I was just curious, if we're going to decide which step, we ought to know what the rates are.
Yes, sir. And the way it's written right now, the rate that we were using as an example is a reconnection fee, as though you had not paid your water bill previously. If somebody doesn't pay their water bill and they get their water turned off, it's $75 for them to get their water reconnected.
70,
70?
sorry, yes.
$70, I'm sorry. $70 to get it reconnected. And so if somebody is found according to what's being proposed, is if somebody is found in violation of the water conservation plan, in other words, they're watering on a day that they shouldn't be watering, and they actually go to the trouble to cite them, then that would be the penalty, $70 for the first violation.
Well, I know there's been moratoriums on a lot of things because of COVID and layoffs. Are we granting any leniency there? What is the city's policy right now?
So, we're
moratoriums on renters and.
yeah, that's true, and that expired. What the governor had put out, where you couldn't do that on disconnect. But what we're talking about tonight is the water conservation plan, which doesn't relate to new hookups or anything like this. This is strictly if we were in a time of drought season and we were restricting water. You remember we did this, I don't know, probably 20 years ago. If you had an odd number of residents, you could water on these days.
Right.
And if you were even, it was these days. So that's kind of what we're talking about. It's a conservation plan.
Well, I just asked that because I was talking about reconnect, which means people got their water turned off. So
Right.
to me, it's a logical question.
Yeah. So they were using that as a penalty if you got caught doing something when you shouldn't have been doing it.
Well, I haven't been too inquiring about it. I was just curious if we had a moratorium on cutting people's water off with all the layoffs and stuff.
We
I'm
did.
just curious.
We did when the governor signed that executive order on utilities, but that's since expired, and I think we've been working through I think everybody's caught back up. There may have
That
been.
is correct. Back last March or April, right at the beginning of COVID, is when the governor issued an executive order that said, we're not shutting off people's utilities. And actually, before that, this council considered that, and we agreed. That
Okay.
went until the end of July time period last year. And then we made arrangements with people to say, hey, look, we'll give you 6 months to get back healthy. And I believe Dee can correct me if I'm wrong, but the vast majority of our residents that had elected not to pay at the time got caught up within the first 2 to 3 months. Yes, within the first 2 to 3 months after that, and it didn't take the 6 months. So,
Okay, thank you.
yes, sir.
I'm
And back
clear
to
in
you-
my mind now.
Yes, sir. And back to your other question, Marlo has found out if you're a brand-new resident and it's an existing house, it's a $40 deposit on the water meter and a one-time $10 connection. So right now, if you're a new customer, it costs $50 to get your water started.
Okay.
And then if you pay current for 12 months, you get your $40 back.
Yes, sir.
Times has changed, Mayor. When I hooked up, it was $10.
On and then Brandy.
Actually, I found that on the website, so I was going to pass that along, so that's what I was going to say.
Brandy.
So you're asking for recommendation for Section B on the very last page of this, as far as $50 changing it to the current fee structure, and then you have the 200 and the 300 highlighted. So I understand what you're wanting to do there. But the next section where it talks about violations, it says a mandatory fine of $100 specifically, because it's talking about the courts. Does the courts have a fee structure where we maybe need to address this as well, so we don't have a specific dollar amount there too?
Sections.
In Section C, so we're looking at Section B, we're looking at changing it so that way it reads so we only have to update one section. In Section C, it talks about the violations and then the fees charged by the municipal court, and it says there's a mandatory fine of $100. Does the court have a fee structure too, where we should maybe look at addressing this to a specific, like, percentage, or?
No, we're making it a mandatory 100. If that's what you choose to do, and you choose to make it mandatory 100, that's not going to be changed by anything else.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not just missing a section to get updated.
No, that we're telling the court what the fine has to be.
Okay.
The very last sentence also would be removed.
Ben.
Just so I understand, when we're getting to these fees and violations, that's only when we go into an emergency management type situation.
That's correct. The first part of this, the mayor, the city administrator, or other city official or officials charged with the implementation and enforcement of this ordinance, it breaks all that down in here about how that happens.
And it's not arbitrary, since we have benchmarks set for what classifies as what
It's in the
thought we're in
triggers,
there, so.
the different stages that
Yeah.
trigger that. Brandy?
Can you go back? Can you tell me the water rate structure, the month that it was passed? The date that you gave earlier?
Oh, yes.
January 2nd, 2020.
January 28th, 2020, with ordinance 1087-2020.
Okay, thank you.
Brandy?
I would make a motion to approve the municipal water conservation plan with the updates to the water rate structure for the city passed as of January 28, 2020. 1087-2020 was the ordinance number. And then to update section Section 8B for the fee structure to match the current reconnect fees that the city assesses. And then the violations, this second violation to be 1.5%, And then the third violation to be 2%.
2 times.
2 times, my bad.
Not one, yeah, not percent, but 1.5 times.
1.5 times and 2 times. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Jim?
And I would second that if, and for discussion if needed, but I have no discussion points.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 15, which is discuss and consider approval of a bid from Kansas Paving for infrastructure improvements for Prairie Hills Addition Phase 6. Sean?
Yes, sir. Prairie Hills Addition, Phase 6, is located south of the City Administration Center on the east side of Hydraulic. The developer is SBA Construction. They presented petitions for paving and water last month and were approved by the council. A bid opening was conducted on March 18th, again with 5 companies submitting bids. Good turnout. Kansas Paving submitted the lowest combined bid of $78,759.70, which was below the engineer's estimate of $110,608. And then they're broken out there for each individual one. It is budgeted, and staff recommends approval of the bid tabulation and authorizing the mayor to finalize and execute the contract with Kansas Paving not to exceed 759.70.
Brandy?
I don't have any questions, so I move to approve the bid tabulation, authorize the mayor to finalize and execute a contract with Kansas Paving in the amount not to exceed $78,759.70 to be paid out of the capital project fund.
Tom?
I'll second that.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item 16, which is discuss and consider approval of change order request from Mize Construction for work related to the 61st Street project. Sean?
Yes, sir. Council, this is a painful one. In January, council approved the contract with Mize Construction to relocate and make improvements to certain water lines adjacent to and in support of the 61st Street project. The original contract amount was $155,884, and that was well within the budgeted amount for the project of $165,000. As reported to council during my city administrator's report at our last meeting, Mize had dedicated a substantial amount of time over the past 3 weeks locating lines and valves that were not accurately represented in our existing records, documents, or our as-built files. As such, they accumulated a total of 7 change orders requests totaling $148,398.83. All 7 change orders, in the engineer's opinion, are justified and necessary. 4 of them outlined either additional man-hours spent locating lines and valves and modifications that necessitated immediate action. I can give you an example. Change order number 1 was to relocate a hydrant. It needed to be moved up about 4 or 5 feet, and it wasn't in the right line, so they had to come up 2 feet, put on a 90, come up another couple feet, and then put on the fire hydrant. They had projected and bid out that it was going to come straight up from the line, and that wasn't allowed to be done, so that was a $2,600 increase. The next one was like a $2,750 increase. The third one was rather expensive because it was a matter of accounting for their time over a 1-week period, man-hours out there looking for valves and lines, trying to determine where our pipes were actually at. So again, in this city engineer's estimation, all the change orders are necessary and are justified. The remaining 3, number 4, 5, and 6, they are in progress, but nevertheless are still necessary for the viability of the project. There is a possibility that the value of those 3 change orders will be reduced slightly. Kirk has been negotiating with them back and forth to try and adjust those down. May only be a couple $1,000s, but still, when we're talking $148,000 in change orders, any amount of money could be saved. We recommend approval of the change orders in an amount not to exceed $148,398.83. And the only other thing I'd like to point out is how this plays into the overall budget for a 61st Street project. When it came to utility relocates, as I indicated earlier, the amount originally budgeted or projected for this project was $165,000. So the original contract was $155,000, so we're about $10,000 to the good. Now with this, it appears we're about $135,000, $138,000 over. Well, the other portion of the project that we are responsible for, one of them, is our right-of-way acquisition. Originally in the budget was $300,000 for right-of-way acquisition, and to date we have purchased all the necessary right-of-way for $139,900. So it appears that we're about $160,000 to the good on right-of-way. Still not a good situation, I understand that, but when you look at line item by line item, it's ugly. But when you look at the overall project, it is technically within the budget, if you wanted to look at it that way. It's still not a good situation, so.
George?
Well, first off, thank you, Sean. You answered all the questions I was going to ask
Yes,
about
sir.
this, and I appreciate that. I would move to approve the change orders in an amount not to exceed $148,398.83 to be paid out of the capital project fund.
Jim?
And I would second it for discussion. My question is, I guess I'm not all that surprised because I know we've talked in the past when we've had water lines break that they're hard to find and they're not mapped well. And so at least on this corner and vicinity, are you happy with what the results are? Do we have them marked? Do we know? Did we solve a problem with this money?
Throughout the whole entire process, the one thing that I sat there and said is we better have somebody documenting all this. And we had somebody out there provided from Kirk Miller Engineering that actually had a GPS locator so that we knew every valve, every station, that, you know, where it's ultimately going to end up with. And this will lead into the next agenda item where we can hopefully ensure that this doesn't happen again. But
So some money spent now might save us money down the
Painful
road.
money, but
Yeah.
well spent.
Thank you.
So.
Ben?
And actually, Sean just mentioned what I was going to bring up is our next agenda item will help this. I know we've had issues with this quite a bit, and as painful as this little bit is of spending, it's going to, in the overall big picture, especially with our next item, that will help really,
Yes, sir.
hopefully solve some of these problems in the future. So thank you to you all and to our Public Works Office for working on this.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item 17, which is discuss and consider approval of a letter of agreement with Wilson and Company to conduct water and wastewater system evaluation. Sean?
Okay. Staff is recommending approval of a letter of agreement with Wilson and Company to conduct a comprehensive assessment of both our water and wastewater systems. The assessment would be comprised of 3 primary tasks, the first one being data collection and system inventory, second one would be water utility system evaluation, and then the third one would be our sanitary sewer system evaluation. At the conclusion of both the evaluations, recommendations for improvements will be provided, as well as a preliminary cost estimate that can serve for the basis of a long-term capital improvement project plan. Additionally, based on the recommended improvements, a 5-year utility rate adjustment schedule would be developed, examining existing utility rates for shortages or surplus in revenues versus expenses, establishing a break-even rate structure, and ultimately providing a revised rate structure for not only both our operational costs, but the capital cost of the utility improvements. It is unbudgeted. The total cost of the evaluation is $111,700, and it's broken down into 3 different tasks. Staff recommends approval and authorizing the mayor to execute that letter of agreement with Wilson and Company, not to exceed $111,700, to be paid 50% from the utility fund water department and 50% through the sewer department.
Ben?
You know, this is something that came up, or we've had discussion on somewhat in the Stormwater Advisory Board meetings, and will be very helpful. So I'd like to make a motion to approve and authorize the mayor to execute a letter of agreement with Wilson and Company in the amount not to exceed $111,700 to be paid 50% from the utility fund, water department, and 50% utility fund, sewer department.
Randy?
I second the motion.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. Just want to remind everybody that Wilson Company is also the one that CCUA is using for our plant expansion project. So they'll be familiar with us. That brings us to item 18, which is consider the annual review of water and wastewater rates. Sean?
Yes, ordinance 1087-2020 requires the governing body shall conduct an annual review of the financial conditions of the city's water and sewer utilities on or before March 31st each year to evaluate the need for any adjustments to the current water and sewer charges. As you may recall, in 2020, due to the current environment, issues related to COVID-19, and the resulting impact on our citizens, businesses, and the overall economy, at the time, staff recommended not making any adjustments to the rates. Staff noted, though, at the time that based on that recommendation, the small surplus in revenue realized in 2019 could potentially become a 2020 loss, as well as concerns related to the city's aging infrastructure that we just talked about and the planned future sewer plant expansion. In the previous item, staff had recommended approval with the letter agreement with Wilson to conduct a comprehensive evaluation. At the conclusion of that evaluation, again, Wilson and Company will provide a 5-year utility rate adjustment scheduling for both operational and capital costs. Surprisingly enough, for the financial impact, the unaudited surplus for 2020 happens to stand at $76,735 for water and $104,256 for wastewater. So what we had talked about last year, the small surplus maybe not realized or go away for 2020, it's the opposite. We still have a surplus in both of the accounts so far unaudited. So staff recommends either over to council, either awaiting the conclusion of the system-wide evaluation and then adjust the rates accordingly, or as it was mentioned last year with the concerns about this future sewer plant expansion and wanting to build up a slight surplus, council could also make a modest adjustment to help offset that future debt related to the sewer plant expansion.
Thank you, Sean. Randy?
Well, I think we should wait. So I would make a motion to await the conclusion of the system-wide evaluation to adjust the rates accordingly.
George?
Second that.
Okay, got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Sean?
So is there any kind of idea if there's going to be an increase at all? I mean, does somebody know? I mean, because my thing is, I mean, my fear is we're going to have to increase it. I'd rather do too small than one large increase at once, and that's why I'm just kind of wondering.
I would say that it's too early to determine that, quite honestly. The only thing is, we do understand the sewer plant expansion. We know that that's a rather large bill that's heading down the pike one way or another that had not been accounted for previously. The other thing that we take into consideration is the last time I believe that the sewer rates and water rates had been established, it was more a financial type decision with what are our revenues, what are our expenses, what's the operational cost. And I don't believe before that we have the capability to factor in what is the actual replacement cost or the capital cost of the pipes themselves. In that particular case, when Wilson and Company gets done and they present a 5-year capital improvement project that says, hey, in the next couple years, this water pipe happens to be 60 years old and is probably going to need to be in replacement. Our water rates had not taken that into consideration previously. Logically, somebody would say more than likely I could see that there would be an increase to the rates. But right now, I don't know whether that would be slight, whether it be large or not. So it's not a good answer, but it's the best we've got right now.
So if we don't raise it right now, when is there an expectation of when we'll know when that'll be?
The rate structure should be done the whole entire, because part of the thing, if I can go back to expand on what the Wilson and Company contract will also do is they're going to completely model our system. If a new company wants to come to Park City and says, hey, I want to locate here, here's my water demands, 50,000 gallons a month. Can you do that? Right now, we don't have a very good answer. So they will be able to model our system to figure out, you turn this valve, you increase your pressure, here's what's actually happening. So it's going to take some time to build that model, and that's why we wanted to get this going now. We have kind of indicated to them, we know when our budget season starts, and that would be a good start to start getting some of these plans for 2022 to figure out what would be available. But it will still be another 3 to 4 or 5 months before the evaluations are complete.
Good.
Ben?
So far, we're still really not doing anything as far as building up savings concerning the water treatment plant that we're going to have to do something with here in the near future.
Not at this time, sir.
So really, we're looking at, one, are we going to have any sort of plan in place? Or are we going to wait? I guess maybe might be a better way to figure out if we're going to put a plan in place when we get the water rate study back and account for both the water rate study suggestions plus any adjustments we want to make for the water treatment plant. So, I mean, that could be, let's just say, I mean, we don't know what the water survey is going to come back at, but the only thing that's going to account for is just for upgrades and maintaining.
I tend to believe that we will get a very complete picture just because of the fact Wilson and Company is the one who's responsible for the sewer plant upgrade. So they already know what that is. It will be at that time council's determination as to how quick, or plus it's a CCUA decision combined with Bel Air, how soon, what's the rate structure of that debt for the sewer plant expansion. Ultimately, that gets passed on to Park City and into Bel Air, but so a lot of it will be the determination of the CCUA board to figure out how long they're going to spread that debt over time. So again, a lot of unknowns at this point in time, and that's why I applaud your comments, but I wouldn't want to venture and say, oh yes, they're definitely going up. They may not go up. It's logical that they should go up, whether that's a small amount, large amount, undetermined at this time.
I think we're going to see something that's going to ask for some increase. And I think probably what we'll do is whatever that comes back, and I'm looking in the crystal ball that I don't have, but I think there will probably be something where we all have to stair step to get to that point, to not make it painful. The last time I think we did something, we really hadn't adjusted these, and I brought up the fact that we had the wastewater treatment plant we were doing, and I can't remember, we did something really small just for that side for the wastewater, but in reality what we did is probably a little scratch in the surface. So I think if we did something else like that again today, we'd be doing the same thing. Like if you did nothing on the water side and did 1% on the wastewater, you know, what's that going to calculate out to us? Plus, we have to remember we got a bunch of new customers coming in, too. So, new businesses where, you know, some of that cost is going to get spread.
I guess I'm just more supportive of doing an increase now. I'd just rather see 2, 3, 4 modest increases than one big increase. And two, the sooner we start it, I mean, really, let's just think about when you're buying a house or a car. I mean, the sooner you start paying for it, I mean, it's already going. Where, you know, if you're paying for 48 months, your payments are way higher. Where if you start now, I think it just softens that blow for people that are on fixed incomes, and I mean, and like you said, they're adding more customers on, so more people paying.
All right. Well, we have a motion and a second. Not seeing any further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
And that passes 5-2. That was the last item on the agenda this evening, so we'll move on to governing body reports, and we'll start with George Glover.
Yes. In coordination with our Community Relations Board, we talked about the fishing derby this year. In lieu of everything that's going on with COVID, we have decided to tentatively go ahead with it on June the 19th from 9 to 11, just to let people know. Again, that's a tentative date. Things could change as they did last year, but at this time, a lot of our sponsors that worked with us that weren't able to last year have kind of came back. I've spoken with some of those, and they're willing to partner with us this year. So that's encouraging in itself. So again, that's June 19th. More details to follow from 9 to 11, and that's the Chisholm Point Pond on North Grove, and this will be our 12th year. Also, the LEAP program has extended their application period to May 28th. If you have a high electric or gas bill that you need help with, you can go ahead and apply at LEAP. It's the Low Income Energy Assistance Program, and you can go to the Department for Children and Families and find that link to apply for that. And that's, I think it's in lieu of COVID that's been extended by the state. Again, that's May 28th. That's for gas and or electric. You can split it if you like, but that will help a lot of our customers or a lot of our residents with that bill. That's all I have. George?
I don't have anything. The only thing I'd say is a lot of exciting things going on.
Brandy?
We had a few things that were painful tonight on the agenda, but I just want to say thanks, Sean. You've kept us up to date that it wasn't as shocking. Just by seeing it on the agenda, you've kept us in the loop, so I appreciate that.
Tom? Jim?
Yeah, a lot of fun things, interesting things happening in Park City, so it's a good time to live here. I went to the park with my daughter on Saturday, and a couple approached me, just asked if I was a local, and they were they had read on our website that we had walking trails and wanted to know which ones were done and where to go. And I just asked them why they were here, and they said, well, they were here because it was a COVID environment. They could come and stay in a hotel and see their grandkids, and they were at the park having a barbecue. So, I mean, it was a pleasant and unexpected conversation. So, good things going on.
Ben?
Sure, just want to mention this Saturday from 10 to 3, the Hunter Health Clinic in Wichita and Grove is offering vaccinations, their COVID vaccinations for those 18 and up. You do have to make a reservation there, so you can go to Cedric County Government, Facebook, my page there, whatever. Several places have that information where you can make your reservation if you'd like to receive a COVID vaccination. Again, that's this Saturday from 10 to 3 at the Hunter Health Clinic. For anyone that wants to do that there. Also want to say thank you to all those our frontline workers on this there. They've been through a lot even over the last few weeks and months as we've ramped up vaccination. And so thank you to all those that put their work in there.
Yeah. John?
I have nothing.
Okay.
Anybody left?
Nope. Ben?
Motion. Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And that motion passes 7-0. Thank you.